So now I'm getting to the anthropic principle, and the time is getting scarce. But let me just say a bit about this. Another trace of God's presence in the world, the precision of the, in certain parameters in the nature that we observe. The prehistory of the universe from its beginning in the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago until the present shows many signs of God's action in these coincidences. The laws of nature show a marvelous order that's a sign of God's action for someone who believes. The order is really something remarkable because you could imagine that the world would just be chaos. But there is order. Einstein observed that it's a mystery why the regularities and order that we observed in the past are still valid in the present and in the future. And one is tempted to say, well, it always was that way. But of course, if the fact that it always was that way means that it will be that way in the future, you're supposing exactly what he's putting into question. So order is a sign. And now especially the physical constants that are observed seem to be carefully and precisely chosen to make our existence possible. I'm going to give you just a couple of quick examples of this. Some of these coincidences. Some of these constants in the laws of nature need the exact values they have within very tiny variation for us to exist. So let me give you a relationship between the electromagnetic field and the gravitational field. The electromagnetic field is enormously enormously stronger, but because two charges of the same sign repel, that's why it's not in practice so much stronger. All of chemistry and biology depends on molecules formed by atoms that exchange and share electrons. That's the basic. So what would happen if this field, the two fields, had a slightly different relationship? Let's look at that. If the electromagnetic field were one order of magnitude stronger, then the electrons would be trapped inside the nucleus of the atoms. So, no chemistry, no life. If, on the other hand, it were one order weaker, the electromagnetic field, the electrons would escape completely. You'd have nuclei and electrons traveling around, no molecules, no chemistry, no biology. So that's an interesting example of what would happen if you made a small change. Let's look at the size and age of the universe. It's so enormous, but does that make any sense for it to be so big? From the Big Bang, 13.7 billion years ago, according to all the present calculations, this original soup with an enormously high temperature cooled, and the particles formed agglomerations, growing into stars and into galaxies. Atoms of hydrogen with just one proton were fused together to form atoms of helium with two protons in the immense heat and pressure inside large stars. And then the atoms of helium combined into carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen and other heavier elements. For example, 2 atoms of helium would make 1 atom of carbon with 4 protons. An atom of carbon with 1 of helium forced together in fusion would give 1 atom of oxygen. An atom of oxygen with an atom of helium would give 1 of nitrogen. Well, for life as we know it, we need all these elements. This is very interesting because it's another thing I haven't put in the slides, but the cross-section of oxygen, of the oxygen atom, which tells what is the probability of an interaction, has to be very, very close to what it is, within a fraction of a percent. Because if it were a bit bigger, the interaction, then almost all the oxygen would have become nitrogen. If it were a little bit smaller, then almost none of the oxygen would have become nitrogen. So have this balance of both elements, it has to be very precisely what it is. Well, what happened? You had these atoms in the interior of the star. No good. We're not going to have life evolving in the center of a star. So the supernova, as we saw in the Crab Nebula, explodes. The fuel, the hydrogen, runs out, and there's no longer energy expanding from the future, from the center, and so the star begins to contract, and it contracts much more because of the rapid rapidity, and then explodes. And so it throws out all these elements. So here's something more about the size and age of the universe. The age of the universe had to be so great for these molecules necessary for life to exist. Why is that? Because they had to have these heavier elements thrown out into intersidereal space, and then they would contract, they would form agglomerations, stars and planets. Our planet is fossil matter. Well, in order to exist for so long without collapsing, the universe has to be as big as it is. And in order to have stars and galaxies and planets, there has to be enough density of matter so it wouldn't just be completely isolated particles. So what we have to have, hundreds of billions of galaxies with billions of stars in each one, with 100 billion stars in each one. All of this is necessary to have a body like the Earth or like the Sun. There are many other such coincidences the time doesn't permit. But here are a few things about the position of the Sun in the solar system. The Sun has to be more or less in one of the arms of our galaxy in order to have the right mix of elements. The type of star our Sun is, it has to exist for several billion years. There are other stars that exist just for 100 million years. No life in that case. The position of the Earth relative to the Sun, it was too close to be too hot, it was too far to be too cold. The Moon keeps the Earth rotating around the same axis. If not, the axis could change and could be pointing to the Sun. Imagine the axis pointing to the Sun. That would mean that the day would be 6 months, and the night would be, the summer would be 6 months, and the winter would be 6 months. So that would make our climates absolutely impossible for life. Even Jupiter, the presence of Jupiter is important because it affects the asteroids and keeps them from hitting the Earth. So many coincidences. Well, I'm going to leave that now and go on to stop. This beauty in nature calls us to respond. The experience of being overwhelmed and overawed by a beautiful scene is really a mystical experience. We feel open and receptive. We want to accept and receive what is offered. There's a story in the Book of Kings about Elijah when he encountered God, and there was a great wind, there was an earthquake, and there was a fire, big fire, and God was not in any one of those, but there came a gentle whisper, a little breeze, and God was in the breeze. The beauty and gentleness of the breeze revealed the Lord to Elijah. There are a couple of reflections here by Saint Teresa of Lisieux in her love of nature, but I'm going to skip them. And here are two beautiful icons from the Eastern Church that express the beauty of the Lord. Our Lady of Vladimir and the Christ of Ruplof. In the Eastern churches, they have an iconostasis with all of these colorful icons. And I had an experience of sad contrast of the absence of beauty. The Cathedral of Our Lady of Kazan in Leningrad was made into a museum of the history of religion and atheism. I was there at a mass conference in 1982 and saw this. And this beautiful iconostasis with all the colorful and joyful images had been removed. And in its place, there was a low counter, a drab low divider, And there, instead of the images, the beautiful colored images, there were black and white portraits of Marx and Lenin, Engels and Lenin and other socialists with rather sad expressions. And I thought, from the beauty and joy of the icons to these sad expressions in black and white was very symbolic, manifested something deeper. Happily now it's been returned to being a cathedral. God is love. We shall love the Lord your God. And God, whoever loves has been born of God and knows God, and if you do not love, you do not know God. And finally, our encounter with God in the beauty of nature, in finding these marvelous coincidences and feeling awe and a call to respond. The immensity and beauty of the universe around us inspires awe and calls us to adoration. This beautiful experience of friendship and love is an encounter with the one who is the source of love, who loved us first. And so we can behold the beauty of the Lord in so many ways. Thank you.